I noticed in 2024 that all the brands and creators that I love do an amazing job of building community. So I put together this insane panel of community experts to give us the blueprint for building an amazing community in 2025.
Forget social listening metrics, talk to people.
If you're a brand or a company that's just focusing on ROI, you're not going to stick in the hearts of minds of people.
We cover how brands like Diary of a CEO and Lux Collective are building incredible communities.
The most valuable tool that they have is their Telegram group. Stephen shares voice notes, updates, they tease out product drops.
They have hundreds of people in those live rooms every day when they go live, whether you're thinking you're going to buy a 10-gram Birkin or not.
Why this is so valuable for your brand or your business.
If you can just get someone in, really nurture them, really look after that person and create a loyal and engaged advocate, that basically does your job for you.
The actual practical tactics that make building community easy.
We're in the DMs, we're seeing them in person, we're going to events. We have a sort of depth of information that can be really hard if you're just looking at graphs and numbers.
And this was our first live episode of the podcast. So if you'd like to join us at the next one, make sure you join the email list in the description. Really hope you get some value from this. Let's dive in.
Community is a term that gets bandied around a lot, but I think we all know in this room the power of it, and the brands that are doing community well in 2024 are absolutely crushing it, and they crush it for a number of reasons. One of them is that their customers absolutely fucking love them. They talk to their friends about them. When they drop a new product, they buy it instantly, and they're extremely loyal. They actually are not interested in the competition. But I'm sure all of us have been in meetings where you ask if someone's doing community, have they got a community strategy, and they say, yeah, we've got someone, they're on Instagram, and they reply to the comments. Spoiler alert, for this panel, that is not building community. So I thought we might just start with each of you have built community, and you've created some amazing spaces and communities. What would be like the one thing that has been fundamental to building those spaces?
So I think quite often, and rightly so, marketers will rely on things like social listening and metrics and look at graphs and content that's performed really well. And that's amazing. And like we absolutely should be doing that. But I think what we actually lack is going and actually talking to people and talking to your community. So not just looking at like, oh, this post went viral, people must be into X, Y, Z. Actually having real conversations with the people in the spaces that they're hanging out as well. So last year I spoke at a Gen Z conference in Berlin, and the ex-head of Facebook groups was also speaking. And I asked him the question, I was like, right, if you want to really get to know a community at scale, like not just a small community, but we're talking like hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, what's the best tool that we can use as marketers? And he said, without a shadow of a doubt, like forget social listening metrics, forget like actual just like stats and metrics, talk to people. Whether that is focus groups, whether that's events, whether that's like intimate spaces, so Telegram groups, WhatsApp groups, spaces that you can actually go and have conversations, get real-time feedback and not just rely on metrics, because a lot of the time, like I know so many people who are social media lurkers, so they'll like come up to people at events and be like, oh my God, love your content. And I'm like, I literally have no idea who you are. Like, you've never engaged with my content before. But not everybody is outwardly expressing how they feel about brands. Like, some people don't like having a social media presence. So you can't just rely on what the data is telling you. It's really important to, just really also understand the sentiment. I think when you actually chat to people, you get a real sense for how they actually feel about your brand or your product or your service or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think really, having conversations and not relying on metrics is something that I would advise, even for brands at scale as well, like bigger communities, not just smaller communities.
Being a creator, it's really interesting. I get a lot of brands pitch to me products and things like that, and services that they think that my audience will really like based on metrics and data that they're looking at. But actually, like if I was to promote this product or talk about it to my audience, they would not care, and it would be really awkward and weird. Shout out to a particular thyroid supplement brand. It was just so random. But when I think about creating community, I actually think about hosting. So I'm an Aries, and I am the friend who loves hosting dinners and drinks at my house. It's my favorite thing to do. And what happens when somebody comes to my house, I greet them at the door, I say hello, I take their coat, offer them a drink. I have multiple selections of teas and various really lovely things. And I've usually thought through the experience that we're going to have together to the smallest of details. I often work and consult with brands who are hosting events online and in person, and I think one of the things that brands struggle with is that they get a lot of talent or they get a lot of people in a room and there's no way to connect. There's no easy way to say hello to the person next to you. They get a bunch of influence together on a PR trip and they're great, they're happy to be there, they're being paid to be there, but they're not really that interested in talking to each other. So I think community has to go back to those really human skills of those one-to-one person conversations.
I think that actually, like the one-to-one conversations, when you're a brand, it's like, how do you actually do that? Especially lots of us, I feel like the trauma from me being in a one-person social team for a while has really come through there, are in like one or two people social teams. And I think the best way that I found working brand side is actually going live and as the brand. So something that I used to do when I worked at a beauty brand previously is something that Lauren, who's going to speak in a little bit at Benefit, used to do too, was weekly going live. This was a few years ago. So on Facebook and on Instagram, and building that community there. So this was like 2018. We were doing EGC before EGC was like a thing. And I think that there we turned 5 of our employees into the faces of the brand, so people would recognize themselves in those people, and we would go live every week, twice a week at the same time. People would know to come to us, and we really did build actual communities there. I knew that people were having babies, and I knew there was a wedding, and when you work at a brand and you're just sitting behind, no one's volunteering that information to you. So how are you supposed to build an actual community? You need, I think, real people to really help a brand do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Kyra, do you want to maybe just touch on the skeptics in the brand's audiences who may be skeptical of any community building that you're doing and may feel that it comes across as inauthentic or fake? How can we get them on side and create community in an authentic way?
Yeah, I like thinking about going back to that analogy of having somebody come round your house. You wouldn't just open the door and not speak to them, put on TV and just ignore them and hope that they kind of had a good time. It's about being really personable and replicating that where you can digitally and online. And I think there's loads of different ways that you can do that. For example, the partnership that I have going live in a couple of weeks with Squarespace. It's an online summit, but what we're going to do to make it sort of more real life and in person is by adding this element where people get like a printed newsletter and also a coffee coupon to come and for the first people that sign up to that event. So I think it's about looking at how you're making these sort of like online spaces and campaigns really real for the average person.
Just out of interest, does anyone remember, I don't know why I'm laughing, it was actually really traumatizing. Does anyone remember the social media outage that happened a little while ago when Mark Zuckerberg was just like, bye, and like Instagram shut down? Yeah, lots of nods. I think everyone like collectively shut their pants when that happened. But after that, I was like, oh my gosh, like we really need to think about if these platforms just like have a meltdown or we can't access them tomorrow, how do we access our communities? Like, how do we build conversation and know that we can still have these connections with people offline and online? So I've been saying to everybody, look at building your mailing lists, look at an app where you own that data, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. I interviewed Grace from the marketing director of Diary of a CEO for my book, Grace Andrews, and she said that when it comes to Diary of a CEO, the most valuable tool that they have is their Telegram group. It's by far their smallest, So they have like millions of subscribers across channels. But she said the Telegram group, at the time there's only about 70,000 people in it, so I imagine that's grown. But she said we get so much insight from that group because Stephen shares voice notes, updates, they tease out product drops, they talk about different topics and kind of get the appetite for what their audience is interested in. So then when they go live on the bigger channels, they know that they're like die-hard advocates. I call them die-hard Dennises in my book, like your real kind of invested community. They've already kind of said that they're interested in what they're about to put out there online. So I think having these spaces that aren't reliant on, I know we spoke about the A word, the algorithm in the last chat, but like we're not reliant on visibility in traditional spaces. So almost having like your plan B where you can really also harness your diehard advocates as well.
I think that's really interesting because if you're a brand or a company that's just focusing on ROI, when something like that happens where there is a shortage or an outage, you're not going to stick in the hearts of minds of people. They're not going to come to your website because they've remembered you. They're going to go to the brands that are already existing in an authentic way within their communities, which is why I'm a real advocate for brands working with micro creators and these really niche targeted audiences, because that's really how you stick in the hearts and minds of people.
Yeah, I love those tactics, and I love the voice notes from Stephen, a particular favourite of mine. I think it's that depth of connection you get. So you're reaching thousands and thousands of people, and it feels like you've got that one-to-one connection. You really feel like you're part of the podcast, part of what he's building, part of his journey. And I think, if you think about depth of connection, I think that's a really important thing in building community. Beth, maybe do you want to touch on, is this right for everyone, community building? How do you know if you should be prioritizing it?
Hey guys, if you want a full breakdown of the strategies we discussed in this episode, click the link in the description and you can go away and implement them yourself.
I think in the ideal world where we've got a social team that's able to do everything, yes. But in the realistic world of where we all are, we need to, again, as we talked about, and will be all day, take a step back and look at our strategy and what we are actually trying to do. And if we are trying to build trust with these with a group of people, and we really want these advocates to be talking for us, then yes, you want to build communities and people who will talk about you in rooms that you're not in. The same as like your mates and like how you see that. But I think where, again, lots of one-person teams, and is that actually where you're going to get the most back out of it? If you want to also be on all of these different platforms, you want to create short-form content, long-form content, you need to be doing daily stories and all of the other things that come into it, then as important as community might be, that is dependent on every single one of your brands that you are in. And that is a job that needs to be done first before you just start doing things. I think if everyone in the industry could take that step back, and I know, as I said earlier, we're all just thinking about what's going out today, never mind taking a bloody step back. But I do think this is such important work that needs to be done. And then we can all decide, okay, we've only got this many hours in the day. This is what we are going to focus on.
In terms of examples that we can look at, who do you think is doing a great job of this? And like, what's the one thing that drives it?
Ben and the guys at Lux Collective are doing a really good job of going live. So they have found for them, TikTok Shop, love or hate it, they have found this amazing space, not just for them to sell their products, but also to grow their community. They, again, have hundreds of people in those live rooms every day when they go live. Whether you're thinking you're going to buy a 10-gram Birkin or not, I'm there. I'm 100% not buying it. But I am watching the content. I am liking the characters that I see on screen of him and his team. And again, they are not just broadcasting to people, which is something the platform said earlier. They are actually having two-way conversations. And this is why I think live is so important, to be able to have that back and forth with your community. They also took some of their customers and turned those into influencers as well. So instead of gifting influencers, they brought some of their well-known customers who always chat on live with them and have bought things from them previously and are sort of turning them into influencers as like a byproduct of them being part of the community to say thank you. But the way the TikTok Live algorithm works is different to Facebook and Instagram because the TikTok live algorithm is shown to not just your followers, whereas you have to be following someone to actually see if they're live on Instagram when it comes to the front of your little stories. Whereas there is a separate feed on TikTok where you can scroll through and see this content. Obviously, we talked a little bit about TikTok Shop, but I think there is a lot of brands missing a trick in, if you have time, prioritizing that to actually talk to potential customers and potential communities.
That's a really good point, actually. The features on these platforms, some of them are really geared up to community building. Kyra, how do you approach which features you use to build community?
I am always asking myself, what will my audience or my community think about this? Like, what will the average person in my audience think about this? If I think that they would absolutely love it, they would be so excited, they can't wait, maybe they've already been asking me for something like this, then I will go for it. But if I think it's kind of like another thing to add, then I won't. I kind of agree with your point in the sense that, like, what you were saying about community, how it takes time. There's a real relationship that you're cultivating, and as a creator, I feel this sense of maybe the word is responsibility to not waste my community's time, to put the best things that I can in front of them at all times. And so if I do something, I really want to be able to do it well. So there's this balance of what I can manage in terms of the work flow and the things that I'm doing, and what I think my audience really want and what they're really asking for.
It is so much more cost effective to retain a loyal advocate who is going to go to the pub and tell their mates about you than to acquire a new customer. When you think about a customer acquisition cost and trying to get someone in top of funnel, and when you look at all of the marketing spend, if you can just get someone in, really nurture them, really look after that person and create a loyal and engaged advocate, that basically does your job for you. I am way more likely to trust my mate at the pub who says, oh my gosh, have you heard about this brand? Or like, I got this amazing product, and raves about you, than a glossy Instagram ad. Like, that is just the reality. Like, I keep seeing the LinkedIn bros talk about the trust recession, but it's actually true. Like, we are in a trust recession with brands and creators because there is so much out there at the moment. People are so wise to when they're being marketed to. So if you can create an experience, if you can create a reason for people to really engage with your brand beyond your product, beyond your service, and just, create either a digital or an offline experience, reward people for their advocacy, whether that is through tiered rewards, whether that is through gifting them, whether that is through bringing them in to your brand and asking their opinions, that co-creation piece that I spoke about earlier. I think if you are brand side, like IKEA do this well, Lego do this well. They have IKEA labs where people can come in, share their experience. Lego, you can submit your ideas and they can go into production. There's actually a sick Web3 brand, a beauty cosmetics brand called Kiki, where users can upload their ideas, the rest of their community vote for the idea that wins goes into production. It's like, everyone's like, oh, it's so innovative. And I'm like, this shouldn't be innovation. This should just be part of the process. Like, if you want community, if you want to create products that people actually want, that people actually want to buy into, go and talk to people. Don't just look at what's trending on social media. Don't just look at what your competitors are doing. Go and actually, like I said at the beginning, like, having that conversation, getting them involved is so, so, so important. And I think it's so neglected.
As a brand, is it better to try and create your own community, or is it better to tap into influencers and creators already in that space so it feels authentic?
Again, I feel like the answer to everything is it depends. But I think, again, that if we've said this is taking time, there are ways that we can do it on a small scale, but we work in-house in small social teams. We know that between our meetings and our posting and everything else, if we do have these chunks of time, we're probably not prioritizing this. I think, speaking pretty honestly, and I can see some nods in the room as well. So I think if this is something that's important to you, then there are ways to do it, as the person who asked the question just said. And it is leaning in, as you said, co-collaborating with influencers, creators, and not just on a one-off basis. If you want to build a community, you want to be someone that's always talking about this brand, and it's not one week you're talking about this, the next week you're talking about that. Beta Squad and some of the guys there have been affiliated to brands for years. So people aren't just seeing this as a flash in the pan partnership, and their community just knows this brand now, and they feel like they're part of it as well.
I would say as a creator, it's so useful if you're wanting to speak to a certain type of customer or person to lean on creators who are already in the space. We talk to our communities all the time, every day. We're in the DMs, we're seeing them in person, we're going to events, we are laughing at the same jokes and the same memes. We have a sort of depth of information that can be really hard if you're just looking at graphs and numbers. There's a nuance that can be found when you're working with a creator. So the brands that I usually enjoy are brands that really tap into both sides. They're working to build their own community, but then they also tap into these more niche and more engaged communities as well to humanize them.
Also, when you work with a creator, you get access to a community that you might not have access to. So again, from a funnel perspective, I always think collaboration is somewhat top of funnel because you're getting new eyes on your audience, but how are you retaining the people at the bottom? How are you looking after them? So I always think like two-pronged approach, really zone in on how can you connect with and reach more people? How can you leverage creator partnerships to grow your awareness, tap into new audiences? But I also think like micro creators are absolutely killing it. Like I think numbers and metrics, like they don't really mean anything anymore. There's a really good case study. There was a US influencer a few years ago called Ari. She had millions of followers, couldn't sell 25 t-shirts. She made her own merch. She couldn't sell it. She didn't have a community. So I also think like really look at the people who are creating like really highly engaged communities. Like there are some really amazing micro creators who have really highly engaged communities. So I would say it's also like, yeah, not a numbers game anymore.
Thank you so much. What an amazing panel. If you've enjoyed this episode, do me one big favor. That's hit subscribe. It helps me grow the podcast, get bigger and better guests, and hopefully get you as much value as possible.